You mentioned 1970s style because you won't have been around probably, but you've read about 1979 when we had strike action across much of the country, and it looks like it is a de facto general strike on the way on the 1st of February. We're going to have train drivers from ASLEF and the RMT, we're going to have NNAC, we're going to have teachers, we're going to have university lecturers, health workers. There's a de facto general strike because of the industrial unrest on your government's watch.
You can take on the rail unions, you can take on the civil servants unions, but, you know, when it comes to taking on the nurses, you don't have the support of the British people. And I've seen the banners that say a nurses for life, not just for COVID.
Well, we have great respect for nurses, of course we do.
Well, give them more money then.
Well, it's not always as simple as that in
That's
life,
the argument.
Kay, because what we have to judge is not only how can we motivate and respect nurses, and there is a serious challenge with retention and recruitment within the NHS. We have to balance that, however, with general affordability to the taxpayer. What can the NHS, with its record level of investment right now, afford? Secondly, the point about inflation, which is so critical to everybody in this country. And thirdly, how can we manage this in a sensible and appropriate manner?
When Steve Barclay is reported at the weekend to be asking the nurses to lobby the Treasury for more money, and when he is reported to be wanting an extra payment now, he's right, because that is the only way to solve the staffing crisis in the NHS and the 47,000 nurse vacancies. I mean, surely that is the logical thing to do.
Well, I think you have to balance that against affordability. You know, what can the country afford? We currently have taxes at a very high level. We're investing record sums in the NHS, and so it is right to take a broader view of affordability. I also think that pay is not the only factor that affects staffing within the NHS. It's clearly an important one, as it is in any line of work, but also conditions and levels of stress and strain in the NHS, particularly during and immediately after COVID, have played a significant part in some of the retention challenges that we're seeing in nursing, for example.
You released a promotional video praising work to find and detain illegal migrants from Albania, and that has now caused a diplomatic incident with the Albanian government summoning the British ambassador for what's called a dressing down about, quotes, shameful bias against Albanians. Do you now regret that video, Minister?
I don't regret the video, but I do think it's important that we work constructively with the Albanian government, as indeed we are. We have a returns agreement.
How is it constructive that the government has summoned our ambassador, Minister? How is that constructive?
Well, I want to have the most productive relationship we can with the Albanian
But why have you
government.
offended them then?
What we have to be able to distinguish between is the Albanian diaspora in this country, who we respect and want to work with as closely as we can, British citizens who are of Albanian descent, those who choose to come here legally, who are of course welcome from Albania, on work visas, student visas, tourists, and those who are coming here illegally on small boats.
My message to them would be, think about the impact this is going to have on working people across the country and on the economy. We know that times are difficult right now. What we don't want to see is the economy harmed by, an act of self-harm by further strike action that makes it harder to get to work, to cross the border, and, of course, to get access to crucial public services.
Okay. We hear from Pat Cullen, the General Secretary of the RCN. She's had very successful meetings with Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, on Friday. She's written to him. She described it as collegiate. And yet the words she used was that she suspected that other figures at the top are blocking the progress.
I don't think that's right, with all due respect to Pat Cullen. Everybody across government wants to treat this matter with a spirit of collegiality, to be as reasonable as possible, to meet with representatives, to talk to them about next year's pay and the challenges that public sector workers are facing. But it is simply absolutely critical to everyone in this country that we do get a handle on inflation. As I say, if energy prices are beginning to fall internationally, then that means that some of the extraneous factors are working in our favour. What we mustn't do is domestically lock in inflation by seeing large pay rises in the public sector or indeed across the private sector as well. But the one area of the economy that the government has responsibility for, the public sector, we've got to be very careful to ensure that we're treating it sensibly.
Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, writing in The Independent, suggesting that strikes could go on for another 3 months. Are you of the same opinion?
Well, I certainly hope not, but that's really in the hands of the trade unions. We want to be as reasonable as possible. Steve Barclay and other ministers have been meeting with union representatives to talk to them, to see if there are ways forward, to discuss next year's pay settlement and set out our arguments on affordability there. But I think what you see with inflation today means that if the international factors are beginning tentatively to work in the right direction, the worst thing that we could do domestically would be to significantly increase public sector pay and then entrench inflation in the British economy and get into a kind of wage spiral.
In the video that you published, you are quoted as saying, "I've been meeting the fantastic staff who are working round the clock to find the Albanians, to detain them, to put them onto coaches, to take them to the airport and get them back to Tirana." Nowhere in that sentence do you mention illegality. Imagine if another country said that of Britain's.
Well, I think, Nick,
you have caused a tick.
Nick, I'm afraid you haven't actually looked at the tweet, I suspect, and your researcher has done you a disservice on this occasion because you're usually so well informed. The tweet was labelled that I was at an immigration removal centre watching the weekly removal flight of illegal Albanian
you didn't say,
migrants.
I've been meeting the fantastic staff who are working around the clock to find the Albanian. You don't say that. You do say that, don't you?
No, Nick, the tweet was labelled
but in the video...
that I was at an immigration removal centre at 4 o'clock in the morning watching the removal of illegal Albanian migrants.
And in that you say, I've been meeting the fantastic staff who are around. I mean, that is highly... That's quite offensive.
I'm afraid we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one, Nick, because what I think is absolutely important...
You think that's fair language to Albanians?
What is crucial here is that those individuals who come here illegally and those people who are foreign national offenders who've committed crimes in our country, often very serious ones, like rape or murder, are efficiently removed by my immigration enforcement officers and returned to their home countries.
And there was an independent pay review last year which concluded that nurses should get the pay rise that they have. We accepted their recommendations.
It isn't independent, is it?
It is independent.
OK. Is it not presided over by the Prime Minister and lots of government ministers are involved in deciding how much that money is?
Well, government ministers play a role in it in that we submit recommendations and give a mandate to the independent pay review body, and we're doing that now for next year, next financial year. But then it's ultimately for that group of experts to look at the evidence, to listen to the perspective of the workforce, of trade unions, of the employers, and come to a balanced judgment.
Don't ministers tell that pay review body how much is in the pot?
Well, we do say what's affordable, as you'd expect, because when any business or organisation considers how much it can afford to pay its staff, it has to work out what is in the pot, if you like.